Hello again. So I want to give you, an overall introduction. Hi, my name is Stephanie Pilkay. I am an assistant professor here at Syracuse University. And my background is in trauma, neuroscience, stress, adversity. I investigate how our experiences create biological changes on an epigenetic level, and how that then drives neurobiological changes, behavioral changes, health changes, and so forth. I only teach psychopathology in the summer, and I know that one of my sections is isolated to counseling students. So welcome. I'm in the Department of Social Work. So some notes about this course. Oftentimes when we register for a course, as I spent my own time as a student and grad student, we see, 6 weeks, I can get it over and done with, and it sounds fantastic. I do want to be clear. Psychopathology is a dense course at every university. So dense that it is not uncommon for students to feel like 14 weeks is not enough. Okay. And at some universities, they've even split psychopathology across 2 semesters so that you can have 28 weeks to cover the content. You're going to be moving really fast, and it's going to feel really dense. It's going to be a lot of stuff. Normally, I would modify a course according to the time constraints that I have, right? I would focus on the main ideas, the main details, provide other information, but like, this is what you absolutely need to go to finish and be competent in this material. The DSM cannot be refined to main ideas. So you're going to have to cover all of it. You are going to be reading about all of the disorders in the DSM. You are going to be reading about most all of those disorders again in the Morrison text. And I provide a video explaining why we need both texts to make sense of what you're looking at. And then I've tried to be mindful about additional articles. So keeping those limited to provide some information. Most of them will be limited to the first couple of weeks. The first week is a lot. It's a lot because you have the introductory material, and then you have more content that's covered in the first week than in the other weeks. And that is because you have more work that's due as we move farther along in the semester. So you have 3 case study papers that you will write. Maximum page limit is 3 pages. So these are not lengthy manuscripts. However, it requires a lot of detail. It is the practice of a clinical assessment that you are going to be required to be concise in doing so, just like you would in practice. You've only got a certain amount of time to write your notes. You need to be clear and defined and logical in the decisions that you make. And you will be doing that with these 3 case studies. You have one due in week 2, one due in week 4, and one due in week 6. You also have quizzes and a final exam. I don't normally like to do a lot of quizzes and tests, but this content requires it because any of you who are going to be taking a clinical licensing exam are going to be faced with questions specific about diagnostic criteria for the DSM. Okay. So my goal is, since this is potentially the only class that you'll have to get this information, is to prep you for that as much as possible. I tried really hard in the first 4 quizzes to keep the majority of the questions multiple choice, with only maybe 2 to 4 short, like fill in the answer, fill in the blank type questions. And then you have a final exam. So the final exam is essentially a culmination of question and answer prompts from all of the other quizzes, so that you're re-exposed to the content again. I do this for 2 reasons. One, being exposed to it the first time each week forces you to have to read the content in the DSM, and to study it a bit. Prompting you on it is going to reinforce it in your recall, which is going to strengthen the neural pathway of that memory. The second thing, for the final exam, reintroducing it again will trigger that recall again and increase the likelihood that you'll hold on to this information. So I'm being mindful. I'm not just doing this for the sake of giving you assignments. I am intentionally trying to hijack your brain in the way that it naturally functions in order to promote greater learning. With that being said, it is a lot. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of work. And it cannot be refined any more than it is. Historically, students have completed biopsychosocial assessments. Not very good feedback on that. Students didn't feel like it really helped reinforce the information. Historically, they've also conducted 3 large, like biopsychosocial papers, where they broke everything down and conducted it. Also, feedback not super good about reinforcing anything on diagnoses outside of those 3 case studies, right? And the goal is for you to become familiar with the clusters of diagnostic themes in the DSM, with some of the most common diagnoses, understanding how to use the DSM, how to consider context for each diagnosis, how to identify and essentially reject differential diagnoses to make sure that we are giving the most precise assessment and accurate diagnosis to our clients. So just be prepared. It's a lot, and it's a short period of time. 6 weeks is not long. If you have questions or you need help, my cell number is listed on the left menu when you open the course page. Text me. You won't always be able to catch me by phone, because if I don't recognize a number, I won't answer it, because somehow the spam people have figured out how to do cell phones too. I guess because our information is mined and sold. Who knows? But if you text me, you do have to tell me what class you're in, and you have to at least give me your first name, because I never save students' information on the cell phone. But every student I've had for the last 10 years, I guess, has my cell number floating around in there somewhere, and my email. So if you need something quick, text me. If you think I can wait a little bit on this and you email me, that's fine. But please text me to let me know if you need me to respond in less than 2 to 3 days. Because here's the thing, with only 6 weeks, you might need to hear from me within a couple hours. Okay, you don't have the luxury of a 14-week time frame. Just know that if you text me, hey, I sent you an email, could you respond? Or, hey, I have a quick question, here's what it is. If you go to reply to me after I say something to you, you're going to have to tell me who you are again. Because as soon as I am done, I delete your information from my phone, and that is for your privacy. Otherwise, I wouldn't care just leaving you all in there, but I don't save student information. Okay, a lot of material, very short period of time. It's designed the way it is to allow you both depth and breadth of exposure and understanding of this information. How to contact me. Lastly, in the process of trying to understand context and bridge the gap between the clinical diagnostic criteria and what we actually hear from and observe in our clients, right? When we're speaking with a person one-on-one and they're telling us their story, we are extracting data from them, right? We're thinking about, did they mention they had, childhood trauma? Did they mention they have trouble at work? Did they mention they're having difficulty sleeping? Did they mention if there were any issues with, emotions and things like that? That's data that you're extracting in order to translate it to the clinical diagnostic criteria. The case studies that you read for the assignments and in the Morrison text may potentially trigger, okay? There are notes about childhood maltreatment, sexual assault, abusive relationships, violent tendencies of an individual, because this is what mental health looks like when we are working with clients. So what I want you to understand is that if you have a history of trauma or adversity, there's a chance that you may come across content that triggers some emotional reactions in you because of what you've experienced. You need to be mindful of your own mental health. If you need assistance, you can reach out to me. I can't be a mental health provider, but I can give you more details. There are online services for mental health available through the Barnes Center, through Syracuse University, and do things to take care of yourself and be mindful of it, okay? One of the most common things for a mental health provider is what we share amongst ourselves. We tend to have greater empathy. And that is because we experienced awful things in our lives. The majority of us have either experienced directly or been touched by those that we care about who've been harmed some way in life, or who have struggled with some kind of chronic mental health issue. Because we have those experiences, we have greater empathy. We make better clinicians. We are seen as more human, more easily to connect to. We often are the people that strangers will tell their life story to in the first 10 minutes that we meet them, and then the stranger will make a comment like, I don't know why I just unloaded all of that to you. And it's because of the empathetic presence that we have. That is because of the experiences that we've had. So more of us than not have something that could potentially be triggered once we start to dig into really being exposed to all potential experiences and the mental health consequences that emerge from that and the difficulties of working through treatment with that. Mental health counseling degrees or anything focused on clinical practice typically are the greatest form of psychoeducation, which is a form of intervention. The more that we understand, the more that we can self-reflect, the more that we can metacognate, right? Thinking about our thoughts and why we're thinking what we're thinking, and create this self-actualization of growth and development. You could even think of it as like post-traumatic growth. And over time, you develop boundaries where it doesn't have those effects on you anymore. And some things might still be very difficult. You aren't required to work with every potential population. I myself thought that at one point I could focus on pedophiles, and that's where my research area was going to be. And after about 3 long, grueling days of digging into the research around interventions and efficacy of those interventions and the chronicity of recidivism for these individuals, I realized I couldn't, that I couldn't maintain a sense of empathy and not continue to experience some kind of emotional stimulation, right? So some of you may have heard about transference and countertransference, right? Transference is when you are eliciting some kind of triggering emotional response in your client based on something they've experienced. You remind them of their mother, their father, their sibling, a boss, a colleague, something about what you're doing and how you're presenting is triggering in them a previous experiences, causing them to behave towards you in a certain way. The exact same thing happens to us, and it's called countertransference. And it's where a client somehow triggers an emotional reaction in you because of your own experiences. Something that they are doing is reminding you, whether consciously or subconsciously, of a person in your present or past, an experience that you had or someone you care about had. And it's creating the emotional correlate to that, right? So for example, 17 years ago, I was in a very bad car accident. I was sitting at a red light. A commercial trash truck lost control of its brakes. Its brakes went out, and instead of going through the intersection, they tried to make the turn, and I was sitting in the turn lane. They hit me head on, knocked my Suburban back about 150 feet, and then sideways and pushed me up over the curb into the grass. I had at the time my 1-year-old daughter and my 4.5-year-old then foster daughter. I was hit with such force that even with my seatbelt on, since I couldn't go forward, I was pushed up and hit my head on the metal that holds the door. And in fact, you might notice my head sort of shake and shimmy from time to time. It's called cervical dystonia. It literally shifted, it reversed the curvature of the spine in my neck, which I have not been able to get fixed for years and years of chiropractic work. And those types of injuries can sometimes cause this dysregulation in the stimulation of your muscles, right? And so I have one muscle that is overstimulated all the time because my spine isn't in balance. And so my head kind of fights with itself. I digress. To this day, even though I'm not afraid to drive and I'm not afraid to be in vehicles, when I am riding with my husband, who prefers to drive, he tends to ride really close to people. He thinks that one car length is fine, no matter how fast you're going. Because that moment of the accident, I just remember seeing this, it essentially was the light, the headlight, seeing this circular glass thing, like right in front of the truck. I had looked away for just a second to talk to my 4.5-year-old in the back. And then I look back up front and I just see this. seeing things right close in my face, I instantly get a startle response. And I get angry with my husband every time it happens. And that's because I was angry at those people for turning and hitting my car with my 1-year-old and my 4.5-year-old in it, and how frightening it was to have everybody have to go to the emergency room. And I was in there a lot longer than my girls were, but I was terrified. What could this have potentially done to my 12-month-old baby, my 4.5-year-old foster child at the time? What could happen, right? Which, by the way, she's now my daughter. We adopted her, but that's transference. He is triggering unintentionally something in me from that moment that I experienced. And it has been 17 and a half years. I don't have any other issues around it, but that one little core thing happens every single time that my husband rides too close and they hit the brakes. As well as my foot tries to go through the floor, I throw my hands up and I gasp. I've gotten to where I just have to not watch. You'll have all different kinds of things emerge because of your experiences when you interact with your clients. And as you practice, these will become less and less and less. You may have some that will never go away because of your core beliefs, or because of some part of your identity, right? So like when I say I have a hard time, there's no way that I could work with pedophiles. It's because I'm a mother of 5 children, and 2 of those children we adopted and they were horribly abused. And I just cannot seem to dissociate or disconnect that from me and who I am when I'm working with clients. And engaging individuals who harm children triggers me every time. So I made the decision when I was doing clinical work, that's something that I'm not going to do. And that may be something that you will need to do as you move forward. But just be mindful that you need to be cognizant of your emotional and physical state as you work through the content. And if something feels like it's triggering you, be preemptive, proactive, and do something to take care of yourself, regroup, do whatever you need. And if you need any assistance, I'm absolutely here for you. Text me, email me. I would prefer if you email me that you text me and let me know that you emailed me, because I wouldn't want something like that lingering for a couple days. Okay, so that's it. Lots of content, lots of difficult content at times, and be mindful of your mental health. This is condensed as much as I possibly can, and I am sorry that it's a lot of material, but there's no way to get past this. And if you need help, you know where to find me. All right, I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture, and thank you for listening.